The Islamic Republic of Iran is a very, very Muslim country. According to the official census, 99% of the country is religiously Muslim, a supermajority of people who believe in the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad. It seems like Iran will always be Muslim, at least from the outside. See, Iran is lying about its data. Sure, the national census might say that only 2 out of 10,000 people in Iran are Muslim, but that census is done by the government, which is run as a dictatorial Islamic theocracy that often deals out death as punishment for being an atheist. Not only does it lie about its data, but many people who would otherwise respond as being irreligious won't, because if they do, they could be thrown in prison or even killed. From every outside source we've got, the actual percentage of Muslims in the country is much, much lower. For example, Glamour, the group for analyzing and measuring attitudes in Iran, conducted an online poll in December of 2022. That poll found that the actual number of Muslims in the country is closer to 45%, mostly Shias. The second largest group was deists, or unaffiliated people, at 26%, who believe in a god or spirit, but not a specific one and not the one in the Quran. And notably, the third largest group was non-religious people, making up a full 19% of the country. It seems like trying to force everybody to be a Muslim actually had the opposite effect, and pretty much everyone resents it. This data might not be accurate either, since it's from an online poll, but that's the problem. Iran has tried its hardest for decades to hide the true number of non-religious people in the nation, meaning that there aren't any safe and reliable ways to collect information on this subject. While Glamour is a generally trusted organization that tends to run quite secure polls, it might be subject to brigading or selection bias. Even if the Glamour poll is wrong and the actual number of Muslims is much higher, like the 96.5% that the World Values Survey reports, that still means that the number of non-Muslims in the country is 175 times what the official census data says. And that's a survey being done by telephone in a police state. If somebody had your contact information in a country like Iran and could possibly be working for the government, and they asked you if you're a Muslim, would you be brave enough to say no? Even if there's only a 1 in 3 chance it's the government, it probably wouldn't be a good idea. In fact, Glamour compared their anonymous poll with the over-the-phone World Values Survey poll and found that they got almost identical results, except on religion. Glamour's results for religion being rather or very important were less than half of the World Values Surveys. After all, the Glamour poll was anonymous. While Iran is the most famous liar, it's not the only one. For another example, Pakistan officially states that there are 0 irreligious people in the entire country. Now, I don't know about you, but it seems unlikely to me that a country with a population of 240 million, about triple Germany's, would not have a single non-believer. The reason you get this statistic is because in Pakistan, being an atheist is punishable by death. So of course when you get a phone call asking what your religion is, you're not going to say that you don't have one. You don't want to f***ing die. And then there's Indonesia, which only officially recognizes 6 religions: Islam, Protestantism, Catholicism, Hinduism, and for the Chinese minority, Buddhism and Confucianism. You can't put down any other answer on the census, and due to the nation's blasphemy laws, publicly being a non-religious person can get you thrown in prison. The thing is, no matter how you slice it, a huge portion of the world simply doesn't count its non-religious people on its census. And this isn't just a problem in Muslim countries. That's where it's worst, but it's an issue in many other places too. For example, up until 2011, the Indian census straight up just didn't let you pick non-religious as an option. Then they looped it in with other religions, making it seem like it was a religious choice, when in fact it was the lack of one. If I were in that situation, I'd probably just put down Hinduism or something, rather than rope myself in with, I don't know, Jews or Shintos. The country also hasn't conducted a census in 12 years, and the next one won't be released until at least mid-2024. Considering that irreligion is driven mostly by development, things like access to electricity, textbooks, and the internet, and that India has developed a ton in the past 12 years, that number has probably increased a fair bit. Countries like Israel and Papua New Guinea use similar strategies, either not including irreligion on the census or roping it in with minority religions. This is a consistent problem around the entire world. Tons of governments outlaw atheism as a concept or simply don't allow you to pick it on the census. It's banned in a bunch of different countries, and you can get killed for discussing it in a positive or even neutral light across much of the world. Even if the government doesn't get to you, your neighbors might. So if somebody shows up at your door or calls you to ask about your religion, it would probably be best to just answer with whatever is most common in your area. On top of not counting atheists, a bunch of census don't count unaffiliated people. This might sound like the same thing, but there's a very important distinction. Atheists believe that there is no God, while unaffiliated people think that there's probably a God, just that they probably aren't one of the ones in a pre-existing religion. They might believe that there's some sort of force or being out there that created or compels the universe. They just don't know what that is, and often think that there's no way of really knowing. It's basically the I don't know enough of religious choice, which I think is a pretty mature decision. A lot of unaffiliated people would be uncomfortable calling themselves atheists, putting themselves into a box that says they confidently think there's no God. But they also aren't following a religion either. The problem is, most polls don't provide that extra box. So while some might tick that they're an atheist, a lot of them will simply put down whatever religion they were raised as, or whatever's most common, even if they don't actually believe in it. Thing is, irreligion is on the rise in most of the world. While religious people don't have many kids, and the largest non-religious majority countries, China and Japan, are currently losing population, having a lot of kids has never been how the number of agnostics increased. Some are born to non-religious parents, but many end up leaving religion later in life. And as countries develop economically, they almost always become less devout as a result. It happened in Europe, the USA, Canada, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand, and now it's happening across Latin America, Southern Africa, and Iran too, as they get more education and access to the internet. This is a known phenomenon. As people get more educated and more urbanized, they tend to be a lot less religious. If you're a 19th century uneducated farmer living in rural France, where the only people you know go to the same church as you, there's very little that would make you question your beliefs. But an educated 21st century Parisian who knows about evolution and talks to Muslims and atheists on the regular would have a lot of challenges to their Christianity. And with the internet, secularization is only getting faster. The internet lets everybody, everywhere around the world, challenge their beliefs constantly. A Saudi Muslim with a high school diploma who only talks to other Muslims with high school diplomas might not question Islam, but one who can talk to Buddhists, Christians, Hindus, Jews, atheists, and college-educated scientists, historians, and doctors all across the planet would be thinking a whole lot more about why they're a Muslim in the first place. So how widespread is this problem exactly? Well, looking at the top 20 most populous countries on Earth, 10 of them don't let you put yourself down as non-religious, at least not without looping yourself in with the tiny percentage of native beliefs. Adding them together, that's 2.88 billion people. Even if only 3% of those folks would consider themselves non-religious or unaffiliated, that's still 86 million people who aren't being counted. And that's not even considering the dozens of other large countries that try to suppress your religion, like Algeria, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, Afghanistan, and Nepal. I would guess that at the absolute least, non-religious people are being undercounted by 100 million, although there's no way of really knowing for now. The only somewhat reliable information I could find on the subject was from Pew Research, which gave statistics for some countries like the Philippines and Indonesia, which got 1 and 3% respectively. But that was done by phone in 2 countries with a lot of stigma against irreligious people, and the last report was done back in 2010, when both countries were a lot less developed. Plus, they still couldn't provide statistics for some countries like Pakistan, because of how absurdly illegal not believing in a god is there. And Pew just took the census data from India, despite it being flawed like I mentioned earlier. And since that's data from 13 years ago, it just doesn't take into account the speed at which irreligion is spreading across countries like Turkey. Just 2 years before, in 2008, 37% of the country described themselves as religiously conservative. As of 2019, that number had dropped to 25%. All while the amount of religious education in Turkey has increased dramatically, the actual number of religious people has dropped. For another example, the percentage who fast during Ramadan dropped by 12%. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, a religious conservative who has served as the president and prime minister of Turkey since 2002, normally wins his elections by 10 to 20%. In 2023, he won by under 5 points, barely beating out a secular social democrat with a name I can't pronounce. And this is in a questionably democratic country at best, where Erdogan has been in one of the top 2 offices of government for over 20 years. And on top of all this, in much of the world, there's a lot of stigma around the term atheist. People are taught from a young age that to be moral, you must be religious, as you would get your morality from the teachings of the Bible or the Quran. I'm gonna be real with you, I hate this idea. You shouldn't need a god to tell you that murder or theft is wrong. You should know that on your own. You should be able to look at a person and think, I shouldn't kill them because doing that would harm them. I don't like being hurt and they don't either, so I don't have any right to take their life. And the same applies for theft, adultery, a non-consensual sex, and all the rest. You should have enough basic empathy for your fellow human to realize that these things are wrong. But many people don't understand this, and think that despite not believing in a god, they must not be non-religious, since they still have morals and principles. Even if they might not be Muslim or Christian, they're definitely not one of those atheists that everyone hates so much. So, how many non-religious people are there, really? The truth is, we don't know. We can't. Because if we were to ask in many countries, we would be executed. We can't get good data on the subject so long as authoritarian governments like the one in Iran and Pakistan are in place. It's just impossible to know. But what I can say with a fair bit of certainty is that there are a whole lot more non-religious people out there than it seems. When religion comes into conflict with the modern world tends to win. In just the past few decades, we've seen Catholic Latin America become a lot more Protestant and a lot more non-religious. After decades of theocracy, people in Iran are leaving Islam. And in the United States, people have been slowly but surely becoming less religious for 3 decades. After learning about evolution and theology and being disillusioned by the strict rules of their fundamentalist parents. I think that countries like Turkey, Iran, and Malaysia are going to be next. As the world continues to develop, it's going to eventually happen everywhere. And when it does, people are going to have to stop undercounting us. Maybe in 5 or 10 years we'll see better data, but for right now, it seems to me that by sheer numbers, the non-religious are the most undercounted demographic on Earth. Thank you all so much for watching this video. It's been one I've been thinking about for a while. It's something that really gets to me, kind of pisses me off. I hope you understand. If you did enjoy the video, it's a little bit less lighthearted than a lot of my other content. Speaking of my other content, the Wings of Fire video got really good reception, so I think I might be making another one of those. Anyway, that's pretty much it. If you hated the video, please smash that dislike button and leave a comment telling me how I can improve. Just, try to be civil, pay YouTube's terms of service. I know this is kind of a contentious topic. If you really liked the video, I don't have any sort of scripture that would compel you to like and subscribe. So, don't feel pressured. With all that said, thank you, goodbye, and I'll see you sometime in the future.